I never thought my perfect marriage would unravel with just 5 words. It was a Tuesday evening when Emma, my wife of 3 years, sat me down for what she called an important talk. I could sense something wasn't right from the moment she walked through the door. Her usual confident stride was replaced with hesitant steps. Her bright smile, the one that could light up any room, was nowhere to be seen. "I want an open marriage," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Those 5 words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'm Jack Thompson, 29, a software developer who somehow managed to marry the most beautiful woman I've ever known. Emma Mitchell, now Emma Thompson, is 33 and works in corporate sales. She's the kind of woman who turns heads wherever she goes. If I'm being honest with myself, I'm a solid 5 on the attractiveness scale. Emma? She's off the charts, a perfect 12. Everyone who knows us has wondered how I managed to land her. It's actually quite a story. 3 years ago, I saw her being harassed in a parking lot. The guy was twice my size, but something in me snapped when I saw him grab her arm. I'm not proud of it, but I sucker punched him and kicked him where it counts. He ended up with jail time, and I got acquitted. That incident sparked our friendship, though it didn't turn romantic right away. That happened after I won a major political contest at work. You know what they say, women love a winner. But now, sitting across from me with tears in her eyes, she looked different. Not less beautiful. Emma could never look less beautiful, but vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "I've been feeling this way for a while," she continued, her voice shaking. "There have been men I've had chemistry with. My heart stopped, but I never acted on it," she quickly added, as if that would somehow lessen the blow. "Because of you. Because of me." Those words felt like acid in my ears. I wanted to reach out and hold her, tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. "What brought this on?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. She started explaining about feeling incomplete, about wanting more variety, about wanting to do things in the bedroom that she either didn't want or couldn't do with me. Me, her husband. For context, Emma's been with 21 partners. I've been with 2, including her. She's had group experiences. I haven't. We've always been adventurous together, trying out each other's kinks. But it's always been just us. When I asked what exactly she wanted sexually from this open marriage, she mentioned threesomes. Specifically with 2 men. I said I'd be okay with another guy joining us occasionally, but only if we could also bring in another woman. That's when she quickly changed the subject. It's not that Emma is against being with women. She's just never been comfortable with female affectee. Not even a friendly cheek-to-cheek kiss. Then came the real bombshell. "There's been this void inside me," she said, wiping tears from her cheeks. "Long before we met. And you think an open marriage will fill that void?" I asked. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. "Why didn't you bring this up before?" I couldn't help asking. When we were dating, we've always been open with each other, sharing everything. Our dreams, our worries, our insecurities. "Maybe we could have explored it then," I said. "But now, I've settled in a married life with her. All I want is this monogamous relationship we've built. I don't want to be out there dating again. To be honest, I'm not even good at that stuff. Charming and flirting with women was never my strong point. Emma, on the other hand, has always drawn people to her like moths to a flame. She has this infectious laugh that could pull anyone in, a way about her that would melt even the hardest of hearts. A simple touch from her fingers could put anyone under her spell. I've watched countless men try their luck with her. At her job, at bars, coffee shops, concerts, you name it. They'd try when I wasn't right there next to her. And yes, she liked the attention. But it never bothered me, because I always knew she'd turn them down out of respect for me. Until now. "What kind of relationship are you looking for?" I asked. Besides the sex part, she wasn't clear about it, but she hinted at wanting something long-term with multiple partners. For the next few hours, she kept asking what it would take to make me feel okay with this. what kind of boundaries I'd want to set. Most of my answers were, I don't know, because I really didn't. I couldn't think straight. The few things I did manage to suggest were basic. Our marriage had to come first, above any other relationship. Everyone needed to practice safe sex. She's on birth control, and I don't use condoms with her. But I made it crystal clear there's no way she's getting pregnant by another man or having some other guy's kid while we're married. That's when we got to the topic of starting a family. And she hit me with the worst thing I'd heard all night. I want to try the open marriage first, she said, before we even think about having kids. That's when I completely broke. I'd done my best to keep it together, but hearing that was like the final blow. It was like everything inside me just drained away. I felt like an empty pitcher of water shattered on the floor. That was the first time my wife had ever seen me like that. And if I could erase any moment from my life, it would be that one. If I could control it, I'd never let her see me in such a state again. By this point, we were both crying and just a mess. She kept telling me how much she loves me, that it wouldn't change, that we just needed to put off starting a family for a little while. That's all. She tried to hug me, to comfort, all to me. But as soon as I felt her arms tighten around me, I couldn't take it anymore. I got up and walked away. I felt crushed. There were too many thoughts running through my head all at once. I wandered around the house, trying to kill time, waiting for her to fall asleep. I ended up sitting in the bathroom for what felt like forever, just avoiding her while everything she'd said played over and over in my mind. When I knew for sure she was in bed, I slipped out of the house. I drove straight to my parents' place. I needed space. I needed to figure things out. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times I'd watched men flirt with her. All the times I'd told myself it didn't matter because she was coming home to me. All the times I'd felt lucky just to be with her. Now those memories felt different, tainted somehow. Like maybe she wanted to say yes to some of those men. Like maybe she'd been settling for me all along. I spent the night researching everything I could about polyamory and open marriages. My eyes were burning from staring at my phone screen. But I couldn't stop. I needed to understand, needed to know what she was asking for. By the time the sun came up, I had more questions than answers. I called in sick to work. How could I possibly focus on coding when my entire life was falling apart? As I lay on my childhood bed, trying to get some sleep, one thought kept circling in my mind. Was this the beginning of the end? Or was it just the end of the beginning? Either way, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. My perfect marriage, the one everyone envied, was suddenly hanging by a thread. And I had no idea how to fix it, or if it even could be fixed. All I knew was that the woman I loved more than anything in the world had just asked for permission to love other people too. And I didn't know if I was strong enough to handle that. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Emma and 32 text messages, each one more desperate than the last. Please come home. We need to talk. I'm sorry. I love you. But I wasn't ready to face her yet. I spent the morning in my parents' kitchen, drinking coffee and staring at nothing. Mom knew something was wrong. She kept giving me these worried looks, but she didn't push. That's always been her way. Around noon, I finally gathered enough courage to read through Emma's messages properly. She called in sick too. Said she couldn't stop crying. Said she'd made a terrible mistake. Part of me wanted to believe her, wanted to rush home and pretend none of this had happened. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was only sorry because of my reaction, not because she'd changed her mind. I texted back a simple message. I need time. Her response was immediate. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. That's when I decided to hire a private investigator. I know it sounds paranoid, but I needed to know if there was more to this story. If she'd already acted on her desires. If there was someone specific she had in mind. The PI came highly recommended. Discreet, thorough, and expensive. I didn't care about the cost. I needed answers. While waiting for the PI's findings, I threw myself into work, coded until my fingers hurt, stayed late at the office, anything to avoid going home. Emma and I texted daily, short, careful messages, like strangers trying to be polite. A week passed. Then, two, the PI's report arrived in my email. Clean. Nothing suspicious. No secret meetings. No hidden phone calls. No evidence of infidelity. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt hollow, because now I had to face the real issue. My wife hadn't cheated. She'd been honest about wanting to change our marriage. Somehow, that felt worse. After 3 weeks of avoiding home, I agreed to marriage counseling. Emma found someone who specialized in non-traditional relationships, Dr. Sarah Matthews. From the first session, I knew it was a mistake. Dr. Matthews seemed more interested in validating Emma's feelings than addressing mine. She kept talking about expanding our definition of love, about breaking free from societal constraints, about how monogamy was a social construct. During our second session, I asked Emma directly if she'd cheated, or if there was someone specific she wanted to be with. Instead of answering, she went off on a tangent about feeling unfulfilled. Dr. Matthews encouraged this. Let her ramble for 20 minutes about her emotional needs, never once redirecting her back to my question. By the third session, I was done. I stood up in the middle of Emma's speech about exploring her sexuality. "This isn't working," I said, and walked out. Emma followed me to the parking lot, crying, begging me to give the therapy another chance. "We can find another counselor," she said, "someone we both like." I agreed, but only because I couldn't stand seeing her cry. The new therapist was different. Dr. James Anderson. More expensive, harder to get an appointment with, but worth every penny. From the first session, he cut through the bullshit, made Emma answer direct questions. That's how I learned about the three guys at her work. Ryan from marketing, David from sales, Michael from corporate, all in different departments, all supposedly unaware of her interest, all married. I knew two of them, had shaken their hands at company parties, had accepted their compliments about how lucky I was. The irony wasn't lost on me. Dr. Anderson didn't let Emma dodge questions anymore. When she tried to ramble, he'd redirect her, keep her focused. That's how we learned about all her other fantasies. The bank teller who always flirted with her, the barista at our regular coffee shop, the personal trainer at her gym. Each story felt like a knife in my gut. But Dr. Anderson said we needed complete honesty, no matter how much it hurt. During one session, he asked Emma why she married me. Her answer should have been comforting. "Because I love him," she said. "Because he's kind and loyal and makes me feel safe." But all I heard was what she didn't say. No mention of passion. No mention of desire. Just safety and loyalty. Like I was a good investment, a reliable stock option. Not a lover. Not a husband. Just a safe bet. The sessions continued. Twice a week. Each one more draining than the last. Emma cried a lot. Sometimes from guilt. Sometimes from frustration. Sometimes, I think, from relief at finally being honest. I didn't cry anymore. Couldn't cry anymore. I just sat there, listening to my wife list all the men she'd like to sleep with, all the experiences she wanted to have, all the things I couldn't give her. Dr. Anderson diagnosed her with hypersexual tantalization, said it was like being stuck in adolescence, constantly craving new experiences, never feeling satisfied. He said it wasn't uncommon, especially in people going through early midlife crises, or those who'd experienced trauma. But knowing the clinical term didn't make it hurt less, didn't make it easier to hear about her fantasies, didn't make me feel any more adequate. At home, we walked on eggshells around each other, slept in the same bed, but might as well have been miles apart. No touching, no intimacy, just polite conversation about mundane things. Weather, work, what to have for dinner. Like roommates, not spouses. The house felt different too, colder somehow. The photos on our walls seemed to mock me. Happy moments frozen in time, a smiling couple who no longer existed. I started spending more time in my home office. Emma spent more time at the gym. We were both avoiding the inevitable conversation, the one where we'd have to decide what happens next. Because we both knew this couldn't go on forever. Something had to give, and I was terrified it would be me. Valentine's Day arrived like a cruel joke. In previous years, we'd always done something wild and romantic. Last year, we'd rented a private jet to Japan. The year before, we'd snuck into a coat room during an exclusive party. This year, we went through the motions. Fancy restaurant, expensive wine, polite conversation, like strangers on a blind date. When we got home, Emma made the first move. It had been over a month since we'd been intimate, the longest we'd ever gone without touching. But it felt different, mechanical, like checking off a box on a to-do list. Afterward, we lay there in silence, miles apart despite being inches away. I took the next few days off work, needed time to think, to process, to decide. Emma did the same. We orbited each other in our house, careful not to collide. She'd become a shadow of herself. The vibrant, laughing woman I married was gone, replaced by someone who moved through life like a ghost. Her eyes had lost their spark. Her smile, when it appeared, never reached them. I caught her crying in the kitchen one morning. She didn't know I was there, just stood at the sink, shoulders shaking. I wanted to comfort her, but I didn't know how anymore. Dr. Anderson said we were both trying to be martyrs, both willing to sacrifice our happiness for the other. But maybe that was the problem. Maybe sometimes love means letting go. The thought kept me awake at night. If I truly loved her, shouldn't I want her to be happy? Even if that happiness meant being with other people? Even if it meant losing her? But then I'd remember our wedding vows. Forsaking all others. We'd written our own vows. Emma had cried while reading hers, said I was her soulmate, her forever, her one and only. Now those words felt like lies. Or maybe they'd been true then. But people change. Hearts change. I spent hours researching divorce lawyers, not because I'd made a decision, but because I needed to know my options. The statistics weren't encouraging. Most marriages that open up end in divorce, especially when one partner is reluctant, especially when it wasn't discussed before marriage. Emma found my browser history. She didn't say anything, just closed my laptop gently, kissed my forehead, and went to bed early. I heard her crying through the walls. The next day, she left a note on the kitchen counter. I'll never ask you for a divorce, but I'll give you one if that's what you want. I love you enough to let you go. I stood there reading those words over and over, until they blurred together, until they lost all meaning, until my coffee went cold. That evening, we had our final therapy session, not because we'd planned it that way, but because we both knew. This was it, the crossroads. Dr. Anderson asked us each to share our non-negotiables. Emma went first. I need more, she said simply. More experiences, more partners, more life. Then it was my turn. I need monogamy, I said. I need trust. I need to be enough. Dr. Anderson nodded slowly. Let the silence stretch. Let us feel the weight of our incompatible needs. Finally, he spoke. Sometimes, he said, love means recognizing when two paths diverge. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is acknowledge that divergence and let go with grace. Emma started crying, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. I didn't reach for her hand. Couldn't. We drove home separately that night. I took the long way, parked outside our house for an hour, watching the lights in our bedroom window, remembering all the happy moments we'd shared there, all the dreams we'd planned, all the futures we'd imagined. None of them had looked like this. When I finally went inside, Emma was waiting, sitting on our couch, the same couch where she'd first asked for an open marriage. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Me too, I replied. And we both knew. This was the end. Not with a bang, not with a fight, but with quiet acceptance, with love, with grace. Because sometimes loving someone means letting them go, even when every fiber of your being wants to hold on, even when it breaks your heart, even when it feels like dying. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes two people can love each other completely and still not be right for each other. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is say goodbye while we still love each other enough to do it gently and